Pecking Order by SomethingTouchesBack. In every schoolyard and prison yard in the galaxy, the denizens self-organize into a pecking order. The arrival of a new member causes discord until the new member's place in the pecking order is established. "You're not going to school dressed like that, young lady. What's wrong with this dress? You said I should wear light-colored clothing with a non-aggressive pattern. What could be less aggressive than a sleeveless white dress with a maple leaf print?" The white dress is fine, Amina. It's the lack of anything under the white dress that bothers me. It's your first day at a new school, and first impressions matter. Boys will. Dad, first, I am wearing panties. Second, these multi-species schools are always overheated to accommodate the insects and reptiles. You'd know that if you went to parent-teacher conferences. Third, there aren't any human boys in this school. There weren't any in the last school either, until 2 months before you pulled me from there to traipse all the way out here. Amina. Frank, drop it. The dress is fine. Amina is right. The classroom will be at least 26 degrees Celsius, and excessive undergarments can make it very uncomfortable. Many of the other species will probably be wearing even less. Also, none of the students or staff have seen a human before, and they won't give a rat's ass that she has boobs. I stared at my mom in shock. I don't think I'd ever seen her take my side against Dad before, or talk quite like that. Dad looked pretty shocked too, but at least he knew when he was beaten. "Okay, fine," he said, turning back to me, "but promise me that you will be flawlessly polite, kind, empathetic, and cheerful so that nobody will blame you if anybody needs to get hurt." Mother gave me a hug and said, "I know that leaving was painful for you, but as the Taoist prophet Laozi said, new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings." Stepping back, she looked me up and down again and brushed a strand of dark brown hair from my cheek before saying, "It's time to go. Do you have your presentation and the bug?" The presentation chip is here in my right pocket, and the bug is in my left. As I spoke, I pulled each of them out to show her. The bug was a grey chip the size of a loonie. It would report both visual and audio information, as well as its own position. But its purpose today was just to let Mom know where I was in my presentation, so she could bring in the food. Yup, the classroom was hot, but not uniformly so. A heat gradient made the room generally hotter toward the back right corner, where the entry door was, and coolest in the front left corner, where Instructor Orich had placed his desk. Well, imagine that. Instructor Orich was one of the indigenous Gematrians, and while Gematrians superficially resembled kangaroos, I was pretty sure they wouldn't last a day in the heat of the Australian outback. The student desks were arranged in the typical layout for multi-species classrooms. As I stood next to Instructor Orich's desk at the front of the room, the endoskeletal herbivores were directly in front of me. They tended to like staying close to the instructor. Behind them were the endoskeletal carnivores. The most numerous contingent in this group were the smallish lutrinideds, who had a distinct otter vibe and ate mostly fish and mollusks. Pro tip: don't be behind them in line for the microwave at lunch. Situated among the lutrinideds, but in the prime spot by the windows on the left wall, were 3 kagzans. They resembled what you would get if a graphics program did a poor job overlaying a saber-toothed tiger's face onto a human frame, making them the most humanoid species in the room, other than me. Rumour had it that those showy teeth, which only the males had, were primarily for show, like a peacock's tail. According to Mom's information, their leader was the ambassador's son, Machair. He wasn't hard to spot. Machair was a head taller than me, and had the biggest, whitest, most perfectly saber-shaped set of canines I'd ever seen, and he knew it. In this school, the students' pecking order reflected their parents' pecking order. Just as the Kagzans had bullied their way into this system, Machair had bullied his way to the top of the class. Sooner or later, he would have to be dealt with. But, as Niccolo Machiavelli wrote, people should either be caressed or crushed. If you need to injure someone, do it in such a way that you do not have to fear their vengeance. As in my last school, the back of the room was the domain of the exoskeletons. The endoskeletal-exoskeletal divide was the most rigid cast line in the galaxy, and that meant it was a resource I could exploit. The dossiers Mom had compiled on every student in this class indicated, among other things, that the leader of this faction was Chantha, the red and black spider in the center of the third row from the back. She only stood a little over a meter tall, but if she spread out her limbs, she could sprawl a good 4 or 5 meters. The left wall of the classroom was the thermal wall. Seats there were reserved for exothermic endoskeletal students. Think iguanas walking on their hind legs. Each seat along the thermal wall had its own heat exchanger to keep its occupant at the optimal temperature for learning. Which raised the question, why does the rest of the room have to be so damn hot? Along the back wall, next to the door, was a long table where Instructor Orich leaned, waiting for me to begin my presentation. When Instructor Orich invited me to introduce myself, he was surprised that I had a multimedia presentation ready, and even more so that it was in a format compatible with the school's system. Got news for you, Instructor Orich. This ain't humanity's first rodeo. Fun fact, across all spacefaring species, less than 0.01% of the population ever leaves their planet of origin. Yet, many of those who do take their underage spawn with them. Every spaceport city has a multi-species school, and the best are in capital cities like this one, for the diplomats' children. For every such school, on every such planet, there must be a first student of each species. Do all those other first students arrive unprepared? Even Mark Twain once said, "It usually takes me 2 or 3 days to prepare an impromptu speech." Good morning. My name is Amina Fletcher. I am a human, and I was born on Sol 3, which we call Earth. As I spoke, the screen behind me displayed a star map, highlighting our current location and, further down the galactic arm, Sol. My father is Frank, and my mother is Sana. Dad was promoted to ambassador this year and tasked with setting up the new human embassy. We've been on planet for about 30 days. We are far from the human economic zone, but my father hopes to lay a groundwork of friendship that will eventually facilitate trade between the Jamatra peoples and ourselves. Sure. The reality is that the Jamatrians are militarily weak, while the expanding Kagzan Empire is strong, and humans have a certain reputation. The Jamatrians approached us with an offer. They would share Kagzan computing technology they had acquired if we would do something about the Kagzan threat to their sovereignty. I let my eyes flick briefly toward Machair, who repositions himself with feline grace. Similarly, I'm confident that, within this classroom, we can all be friends. On Earth, humans have learned to coexist with many species in mutually beneficial ways. For example, the video behind me shows me with my friend Moria. The screen displayed a younger me with a Mexican red-knee tarantula crawling up my arm. Moria has a venomous bite and can shoot barbed bristles if threatened, but she would never hurt me, and I would never hurt her because we respect each other. Chantha, who looked shockingly like a scaled-up Moria, now paid close attention. After the presentation, I began distributing food samples: blackberries, maple syrup, nori, and smoked salmon. I started with the herbivores, then worked my way around the room. When I reached the exoskeleton crowd, Chantha took a liking to the smoked salmon and, in true giant spider fashion, grabbed a second piece. She even giggled as she shared a maple syrup sample with Kith, who seemed overly enthusiastic about it. It was clear I was making friends among the exoskeletons. Finally, I reached Machair and his cronies. His 2 subordinates enjoyed the salmon, but Machair resisted, clearly annoyed that I was disrupting his dominance. Still, he took a bite, unable to hide the fact that he liked it. I smiled sweetly and made my move. As I offered more food to Nori, the Lutranadid behind Machair, I subtly slipped the bug from my pocket into Machair's fanny pack. Now I could track his movements. New pecking order established. The end. Like and subscribe for more content.